It's all over on Cyberstan, but for many within the Helldivers player base, that was a foregone conclusion about a week ago, with new calls coming from the fandom for Arrowhead to completely rework the systems or face ever-mounting backlash from the player base. Of course, I've got it all covered for you, including my brutally honest thoughts, along with a sort of rights and wrongs Cyberstan edition as we check out the aftermath of our latest campaign, so stay tuned for that. In case you want to help support the channel, you know what to do. If you're on mobile, please swipe right to hype the video, and let's dive on in to all the latest. With the end goal of liberating Cyberstan now firmly out of our reach, as our reinforcement budget simply cannot keep pace with the death counts, it's time to take a look back on the Machinery of Oppression update and take stock of Helldivers' latest update. And to kick off this breakdown, we've got a new piece coming to us from Fandomwire. Helldivers 2 players demand changes to the Major Order reward system after Cyberstan fiasco. Helldivers 2 players are watching one of the biggest major orders collapse in real time and feeling like they can't do anything to stop it. Phase 4 of the Cyberstan assault campaign has effectively failed, with liberation progress not rising. Now, with Operation Terminal Directive aiming for planet bombardment, the outcome is basically sealed. This Cyberstan fiasco has sparked renewed calls for changes to the Major Order reward system, as players argue that narrative alone isn't enough to keep most players invested in MOs. Since I'm a longtime grizzled vet of Helldivers, back in the early days when we were still kind of feeling our way around the game, we didn't have the fancy ship upgrades we have now. We didn't have the armory. We didn't have all the stratagems available to us. It was a far different looking landscape when it came to Helldivers. But yes, we were absolutely wrapped up in the narrative of the Galactic War, but we were also there for the swag. I've often said that Helldivers is at its absolute peak form when it combines two things: the narrative and tangible rewards to push for. For instance, Operation Swift Disassembly, which saw us slam headlong into the automatons in a 4-phase operation, pushing them clear off the galactic map. Now, during that campaign, we also received the Quasar Cannon and the Heavy Machine Gun, and so we had that peak 1-2 combo of the narrative with all the propaganda that comes with it, and we were also adding in new weapons that needed rec slips to unlock, which we were then earning during this operation. Fast forward to February 2026, and we haven't seen a ship upgrade inside Helldivers since early July 2024. Hell, we haven't seen a level cap increase since April 2nd, 2024, and we've never seen a metal cap increase. And so, using Cyberstan as our most current example, and I know some of the hardcore divers out there are going to say this is a treasonous statement to make. How could you say this, Buzz? But we were diving with no specialty weapons or swag waiting for us, tempting us across the finish line to victory on Cyberstan. There were no ship upgrades, no cap increases, leaving the game trying to fight with essentially one arm tied behind its back, relying solely on its narrative, which we'll see a little later on in this article, and that was clearly not enough. Made even less effective by choices Arrowhead made during the Valid Pretext campaign versus the Cyborgs. All points that Fandomwire then steps into with their next statement here. The fiasco isn't just about the failure of liberating Cyberstan and the recent MO. It's about why players feel disengaged from participating in them in the first place. Many argued that MO rewards, the medals, are a public good. If enough people contribute, everyone gets the medals regardless of personal effort. That structure, they say, removes urgency and creates little incentive to prioritize difficult MO planets over easier, more profitable operations elsewhere. If success seems guaranteed, individuals feel no pressure to contribute. If failure appears inevitable, there's even less reason to try. Okay, just to be clear here, this is a design choice made by Arrowhead with Helldivers since its inception. Everyone gets the rewards regardless of if you were logged in and fighting during a major order, didn't have time to log in, or just logged in but didn't hit the major order planets or objectives in the slightest. And yeah, we could sit here and debate both sides, but it's pointless. As they say, it is what it is. But where Fandomwire starts to stray off center from the topic, at least in my humble opinion, is with this explanation of players, urgency, and then how they loop in Cyberstan. You see, this isn't about medals and players thinking, hey, it's in the bag. I'm going to let the other divers handle all the hard work for me while I swoop in a week later and collect that fat paycheck. Yes, there is a need for urgency, but the urgency is built around a system of actual rewards and consequences. As in, complete this phase, you get a smoking new support weapon. Complete this other phase over here, upgrade your ship to a new tier of modules. Instead, it's what it normally is. They just use a system of medals for successful completion. And if you fail, you get nothing. And you can have all the most incredible narrative you want. Without that second element of meaningful rewards, you're going to get players that take a look at it all and say, no thanks. However, the article is spot on when they say that urgency and motivation leaves the player base when failure seems inevitable. And by the way, more on that a little bit later in this video. I'm going to summarize here, but Fandomwire then goes on to mention players like so many of you out there that watch my videos. You're all sitting on a full stack of 250 medals with nothing to spend them on, making the reward of completing something like the liberation of Cyberstan less impactful. Going on to make mention that it is this imbalance of effort versus reward that pushes some players to seek out non-MO planets for sample and credit farming, okay, with suggestions coming from the community to make the system better, including contribution-based qualification requirements to super credit rewards, of which, yeah, I don't see Arrowhead ever giving us super credits just straight up for completing a major order, as that would immediately kill their cash shop microtransactions. But clearly the effort versus payout ratio here needs to be adjusted. Back with Fandomwire as we finish up what they have to say in the article. Quote, while we were progressing towards Cyberstan fairly quickly with great success, the situation has escalated during Phase 4 in Helldivers 2. Despite reports of over 130,000 active players deploying at peak hours via SteamDB, so this is Steam PC players only, liberation progress barely moved. And just me speaking here, remember this article was published earlier today, so the timeline here is slightly dated. Going on with their article, they say, this means that players are diving on different planets than participating in major orders. Eventually, High Command, after some analysis, declared that the progress towards Cyberstan liberation seemed unrecoverable and has launched Operation Terminal Directive, shifting the objective from liberation to just total destruction. For many players, that decision confirmed a growing suspicion. Listen to this part. The outcome felt predetermined. If maximum player deployment couldn't meaningfully impact the liberation meter, then participation appeared symbolic rather than influential. This abrupt pivot to turning the planet into dust has reinforced the idea that major orders are narratively controlled to some extent rather than player-driven. Yeah. This fiasco has exposed a gap between player effort and visible impact, turning frustration, dissatisfaction into backlash. Okay, for me, and you guys out there know that I always come with my brutally honest thoughts and impressions, I felt this was a foregone conclusion the moment Phase 3 was hacked and then reworked from missions over to operations. And as soon as I saw that happen, I knew there was going to be issues, because as someone that, yes, has a busy work-life balance, like so many of you out there, it's one thing to just sit down and knock out a single mission. It's another to have that swapped over to a full-blown operation. Now, my suspicions were then flipped to what I felt was undeniable confirmation when we then failed Phase 3 of the Cyberstan operation, and instead of having to go to some other planet to, say, regroup or, say, complete some other minor objective, we were instead just thrown right into Phase 4, Liberate Transcendence. And that's when the light bulb went on, and I was like, bing, there it is. This whole question of the Galactic War and if it is rigged is something I took a deep dive into with this video, which I'll link down in the video description, but it's something worth taking a look at. So between Fandomwire's article expanding on the story of how our major story campaigns have lost that delicate balance we used to have between effort versus reward, players still logged on in huge numbers to take on Cyberstan and the Borg, which actually hurt our chances of a success there. It's that damned Galactic War modifier that flies in the face of all conventional logic, hurting progress made and achieved by players the more players log on to play the game. And again, this is something we've talked about many times here on the channel, but when you have a game people want to play and you as a studio want players to play your game, but when they do and they choose to play a different faction or planet than the MO you're pushing, it hurts progress, that's a sucky system. Now, outside of needing more swag incentives, waiting for players for successful completions outside of just medals, as a player, not feeling like the game is respecting your time and effort is one of, if not the biggest, deterrents from attempting something like the major order or taking on a faction if you're asked to do it. Let's be honest here, if you cannot stand taking on the automatons, you're going to need more than just 70 or 80 medals to entice you to take them on. And if you knew deep down in your gut that no matter what you did, it was all going to be in vain, we aren't going to win no matter what, why are you going to do something inside the game that is going to be less rewarding and less entertaining to you? You log on to play the game and have fun. Why not have fun? Up to this point, I know it sounded pretty doom-divery, and there was actually a lot of good that came with the Machinery of Oppression update, Cyberstan, and the reemergence of the Cyborgs. So let's finish this all up with a little rapid-fire session of what this update did right and what it did wrong. And let's start off with the right. First off, the action on Cyberstan was non-stop, especially on difficulty 10, which is something a lot of players have been asking to see for a long time. Now, in the past, we've had little glimpses of it, say with the Predator strain spawns when it first launched. We saw it again with the Lava Planet rapid acquisition missions. And here on Cyberstan, the shooting and combat was non-stop from the time we touched down on the planet to the time we could hopefully extract. Second off, it may not have been fully fleshed out, but at least Arrowhead tried something new with the reinforcement budget system, weaving it into our campaign with these little extra side missions. It was still a campaign built on take this small city, now move to this slightly bigger city, etc., but there were some dynamic changes thrown in there. And I think with some more refinement and development, this could expand into a better MO system down the line. Next up, and I know they could be annoying at times to take on, but another checkmark goes into the got it right section for the Cyborg faction. They had the radicals throwing smoke bombs and going George St. Pierre style MMA attacks. The agitators commanded the hordes and were sniper accurate with those pulse weapons, and the Vox engines were completely broken but felt very satisfying to kill, especially when you can pull off the 3-vent nade in the backdoor strategy. And finally, the last thing I want to throw in here for the got it right portion is performance. After the total shit show of the Into the Untested update, I didn't know what to expect from Arrowhead dropping in with another huge new content update. But outside of the odd sound crackle and some of the first day crashes, which eventually cleared up, the game held together pretty well. And I really appreciated not dropping from 60 FPS down to 10 whenever a massive explosion went off anywhere on the map. I'm sure I'm missing out on some of the many positives here with the Machinery of Oppression update, like say that funky ARG with all of the automaton symbols in it we saw the week prior, or even something as minor as the space battles we saw going on as we warped into Cyberstan orbit. But for now, let's jump over to the not so good, or in some cases just downright awful, starting off with the Cyborgs, the bots, and how they overall interacted with Cyberstan. We all saw the rockets flying through the buildings. We all saw us getting tracked behind cover. We saw the crazy spawns appearing 10 feet in front of us. But what I came to realize with the mega cities and how the Borgs and bots move through them is that they aren't held back by solid matter, which made it super frustrating for divers when they could shoot us behind walls or through buildings, or how they could pass through solid matter, or say again how Vox engines could slip through walls or squeeze into the tunnels headed out to extraction, even though they were clearly too big to do so. This comboed with the explosive desync made fighting against what could have been a great new enemy type a case of guessing, often leading to us just getting murdered. Kind of in this same vein as how atrocious Cyberstan was in terms of killing divers through unexplained ways. Suddenly combusting when there was no fire around you, getting hit with explosive damage when no incoming shots were anywhere around you, barrages not being correctly telegraphed. I mean, you get it. It all led to divers getting frustrated. Not at the difficulty, but at the random unexplained events, which is not what a Helldiver wants to have to go through time and time and time again. I'm also going to throw this one in because it is probably a more forgotten element here, especially with our recent failure on Cyberstan, but vehicles were clearly nerfed into the ground just prior to us going to Cyberstan to put us Helldivers at a disadvantage. Now, that may sound like a hot take to you, but when you actually look at the patch changes that were installed just prior to the Machinery of Oppression update and you apply logic to them, you'll understand what I'm saying. Looking back on it, the patch said nothing of the percentages, just that all of a sudden a lot of rocket and mortar explosives against our armor had received increased damage versus durable targets, and that's to quote them directly from the patch notes. However, when the wiki was finally updated, the results showed that the increased damage had actually been upped by 3 times what it was before. The community immediately figured out the answer to this one. It was to make the Helldiver vehicles so extremely brittle that they forced the Helldivers to hoof it around Cyberstan on foot, making us on foot more vulnerable to the massive barrages from the Cyborg and bots. And final point I want to make here, and this is something Fandomwire touched on, but overall the inclusion of the reinforcement meter and then tying it to not only those killed on Cyberstan, but any diver taking a death on a non-MO planet was, in my opinion, a bad implementation of this system. Arrowhead tried overall to get the bug divers involved with minor objectives, but in the end, this reinforcement meter did more harm than good when it comes to, let's call them, inter-faction relations. Also, another point we touched on, but there was an opportunity to include something, like some sort of swag, like say our first tier 6 ship upgrade. How about a new vehicle or some incredible new weapon, and then tie it to a Helldiver success, and it clearly wasn't there. But probably what hit the hardest was when the hackers attacked and took advantage of the game's laughable anti-cheat and back-end exploitation. That move in Phase 3 of the campaign to shift it from missions over to operations felt like a gut punch. And whereas we had been winning up to that point, the change immediately took away our momentum and we stumbled from then forward. But as I said in my last few Helldivers videos, overall I think what we started to initially see was a newish approach to major orders, even if it wasn't executed to the best of its ability. And when the Borg and bots weren't glitching through the walls and the rest of it, I found the combat awesome and a worthy challenge. I realize tonight's a bit of a long video, but with now our impending failure, I felt it was a good time to recap the whole update and what went down, both good and bad. But here's where I humbly ask for your input. Drop a comment about the article, about Cyberstan, how this campaign unfolded, and all the rest of it, because I'm genuinely interested in what you have to say, and we do know that Arrowhead reads your comments. If you liked the video and haven't done so already, please consider hitting subscribe and ringing the notifications bell to receive my future upload alerts. If you're on mobile, please take advantage of the swipe right to hype function. And before you go, I'd like to thank all my hardcore channel members, for without their awesome support, none of this would be possible. Until the next one, this is 𝗛𝗲𝗹𝗶𝘃𝗀𝗃 signing off.